Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is called Innovate Your Makerspace, Robotics STEAM Activities to Engage Young Learners. I'm Jason Ennis. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Training at KinderLab Robotics. And I'm joined today by a couple of wonderful guests who are experienced makerspace and technology educators. And we're really looking forward to, I'm looking forward to speaking with them, and they're looking forward to sharing ideas with you about how we can incorporate sort of creative technology education and makerspace practices and philosophy into education, especially as we look to return to more widespread in-person schooling. So before we get going, I'll just say hello to my guests and welcome them. They'll get fuller introductions as we go on, but if you guys want to just say hi, we have Kim Fogarty. She's a makerspace educator at the Park School in Brooklyn.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Okay. Hi, Kim. And then we have Brian Flagg, who is an experienced STEM teacher, science teacher. He was a STEM coordinator in San Francisco Unified School District, among others. And welcome today, Brian.
Hey, everybody.
All right. So before we get started with the actual webinar portion, I just wanted to address a couple of sort of housekeeping points about the flow of the webinar today. I'll be spending a little bit of time giving some background very briefly about KinderLab Robotics, who we are, and our Kibo robot, and the sort of pedagogy and research supporting teaching robotics and coding and creative technology in early childhood. And then I'll hand it off to Kim and then Brian. At the end, the last 15 minutes or so, we'll save for questions. So within the GoToWebinar interface that you have there, there's an option to send a question. Any question you have during the webinar, please just fire it off. Christina Non, who's our marketing director, is operating the command console behind the scenes. Any questions that she can answer right away, she'll do that. And then any that are for discussion by the panel, she'll save and send along to us for the question and answer portion. So anything that crosses your mind that you're curious about, just please go ahead and send a quick question. Okay, and then finally, before we get going, we just wanted to learn a little bit about you folks today. So before we get started with our part, I wonder if you would just take a quick moment to use to answer the poll question that we have, which is about what your role is in early childhood. So I'm going to put a poll up on your screen. It's a quick multiple choice test. Just pick one, and if none of them are a perfect fit for you, go ahead and just choose other, but just choose the role that you feel kind of describes your role within early childhood education best. It helps us to learn more about who you are, what your perspectives are. And that's great. It looks like we have a lot of folks who are library media or tech specialists here today. That makes sense. And this topic of kind of bringing makerspace education and makerspace philosophy into early childhood, that's just who we're hoping to talk to. We have folks here, classroom teachers, as well as district administration. So a nice mix of folks. All right, thanks so much. I'm gonna stop the poll and I'm gonna show the results to everyone so we can see. So there we have, looks like the majority of folks here, the largest group are literacy, library media, technology specialists. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today, and we really look forward to both sharing these ideas with you, as well as hearing the questions that you have and addressing those. So before I turn it over to my wonderful guests, I'm just going to share a little bit about our company and the robot that we create, the research behind it, the rationale behind it, so that you can understand some of the framework that both Kim and Brian will be sharing ideas in. So our company, KinderLab Robotics, our mission is really to promote and support universal STEM literacy. And the way we do that is through the work of our co-founder, Professor Marina Bears from Tufts University. Dr. Bears and her research team at Tufts study age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate ways to introduce creative technology education in early childhood. Dr. Bears and her team have produced numerous research studies as well as books that Dr. Bears has written about her pedagogical theories, her teaching frameworks, and about the tools that she and her team have developed. They developed Scratch Junior, which is a wonderful iPad app for teaching coding to young children. They also developed Kibo, the robot that our company creates. Kibo is special in that it's entirely screen-free. So when young children engage with coding, engineering concepts, literacy through code, they're doing it in a way that's based entirely on physical manipulatives and working with a physical device in the physical space of the classroom. That's one of the reasons why robotics, and Kibo in particular, is such a great fit for sort of STEAM activities, integrated projects, and makerspace and library applications, because we're getting kids to engage with the physical space using materials at hand in the classroom. How can we teach coding in a screen-free way? Well, Kibo's programming language is implemented in these wooden blocks, where each block represents one action for the robot to take. Children create a sequence of the wooden blocks, then they use a scanner built into the front of the robot to read the program block by block in sequence, just like the sequencing that's at the heart of computational thinking and coding. They allow the robot to read that program in sequence, and then the robot acts it out. The commands that Kibo can do are also tied to parts that the children attach to the robot, like the light bulb that you see there. So children learn that the different functions that the robot can perform are based on parts that it's the children's responsibility to attach to the robot to build it as they desire. But parts aren't the only thing the kids are attaching. They're also transforming the robot. So we're engaging in an element of kind of imagination play, of building, of constructing, of transforming the robot from just a blank canvas into maybe a car or a fire truck or an animal or a storybook character. It's this character that acts out the program that the children create. So this way we can tie the experience of robotics into really any curricular area we can think about. If we're learning about the role of civil servants in our community, for example, we can turn Kibo into a fire truck and then create a program to represent what that fire truck is going to do to help the people in the town. It's going to beep its horn, it's going to flash its siren, white and red, and then it's going to drive forward into the town. In this way, the program, the sequence the children create, become a story that the robot acts out. And it's that storytelling that allows us to engage children's imagination and also to create these cross-curricular connections. So cross-curricular connections are actually a theme of what Kim and Brian will be sharing. And it's timely right now because we know that one of the things that educators and administrators are facing right now is this challenge of how are we going to recover from some of the learning loss and the difficulties and the social emotional challenges that children have faced as a result of kind of interruptions of regular schooling from the pandemic. So as we think about the role of like makerspace activities, robotics activities, we can also make those experiences even more impactful if we can show that we're supporting cross-curricular learning goals at the same time. So some of the examples that Kim and Brian are going to share today highlight the ways that we can create connections with math through the movement of the robot, measurement of distances, estimation and prediction of movement, ELA connections, that storytelling framing that I mentioned, connections with science and NGSS standards as we kind of model animal behaviors, for example, or make predictions and record results based on the observations of the robot's movement. So all of these ideas allow us to integrate these other cross-curricular goals to help recover from learning loss as we provide these creative technology experiences for young kids. So that's a theme that will run through what Kim and Brian are sharing. So I'll be getting out of the way soon so you can hear about practice rather than theory. But the last kind of connection I wanted to highlight was just that bringing children back together in person, we're going to need to sort of practice again all those skills about small group work, about collaboration, about sharing, turn taking. Activities like those with Kibo really provide a great context to practice those SEL skills as well. And if you're interested in reading more specifically about this theme of recovering from learning loss and promoting SEL skills, we did just post a blog entry about that on our website. So I encourage you to check that out at the URL down at the bottom of that slide. Okay, but with no further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our guest, Kim Fogarty. Kim is a lead makerspace educator at the Park School here in Brookline, Massachusetts, independent school. She's taught programming and robotics in a number of different contexts, and she also received a graduate certificate from the Tufts Engineering Outreach Center, which is kind of a sister organization to the DevTech group that developed Kibo. So welcome, Kim, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I love talking about robots. I hope I'm preaching to a choir. If I had one teaching tool at my disposal in a classroom, besides pencils, papers, and books, it would be a robot. It is the single most engaging learning tool that I have used in a classroom with students. It appeals to children of all ages, students of all ages. It appeals to boys and girls, and what they're able to do with it. It goes way beyond tech. It meets so many goals. In our classrooms, it's one of the most important social emotional learning tools that we use in the process of teaching robotics. If we're honest, and we can go to the next slide. If we're honest, there's so many demands on a teacher's time in a classroom these days. Well, there always has been. And when we closed down our computer lab and started integrating all the technology, I was really hard pressed as an academic technologist to try to talk teachers into letting me come in and teach robots, because it's not one of the things that is on their list of must-dos. So I found that I had to integrate. I had to identify skills that the teacher was looking to accomplish, and then get them to trust me to demonstrate how that can happen with robots. And that is how most of our robots, if not all of it, robotics is taught in a classroom, is integrated in some way with a curricular topic of the teacher's interest. So I've taught one of the entry points for Kibo in a classroom, early childhood classroom, has always been math for me. When the teacher's doing measurement, we go in and we will explore how far Kibo can go in one robot step or one forward command. So this is, in this instance, we gave students robots and a worksheet and just the 3 programming blocks that they needed in order to accomplish the job. That kept them focused on the task, but how many cubes can Kibo go in one step? And so this was an activity that was for one day that introduced them to the robot, and that we have gone back in to do other things with. But this is one of those instant, you can do anytime. You could do it tomorrow in your classroom. You don't need specialized materials, just your robot and the three basic blocks. And the students can, it can be a refresher, it can be an introduction to the topic, etc. So this is just one way to use it with math. In the science classroom, I did something kind of similar, but framed it differently. So this was actually in my science classroom with some second graders, where we said, the question was, how far, do all Kibos travel the same distance in one forward command. And so we got into a discussion about, well, how can we make sure that it's fair, what we're doing? And then they had to gather data and measure, compare, discuss their reasons. I'll give you a hint, Kibos don't all travel the same distance necessarily in one forward movement. So it's a lively discussion to talk about why that is, what kinds of variables, and it can be weak batteries or dirty tires, but it's really an engaging process for them. And on top of all of that, they are taking turns. They are dividing up who's going to do which job, and then they're sharing with each other what their findings are and just discussing why they think what they think. So it's just super rich, and it doesn't have to be a super complex, involved activity for it to be something that students get some experience with the robots and also a curricular topic or process in your classrooms. There are a lot of curricular resources that I've relied on in using Kibo. If you're not familiar with all the different resources that are available, you can go to the Kinder Lab Robotics website, and it's under STEM curriculum and teacher materials. And it's just you're going to scroll down forever through all the different units that are there. And most of them, if not all of them, are tied to standards. So you can go in and find specifically what you're looking for. I use this as a technologist, or when I'm doing outreach to classrooms, I will sometimes find a unit that I think a particular teacher will be interested in. So I gave this particular unit, Who Am I, to a grade 1 teacher. And she found there's something that caught her eye. And so we proceeded to do an activity, and it was an opportunity to teach repeat, the repeat block, which I don't introduce right off the bat. I keep it in the box for a couple of sessions. But we opened it up, and it's lesson 5, and it's called Every Year I. And this happened in between Thanksgiving and the December holiday. So a lot of times students were celebrating Every Year I celebrate whatever their holiday is that their family celebrated. But there were differences. There were visiting people. There was going to an annual football game. It was really fun. And we used these, you can see on top of the Kibo, I'll reference these again later, but we have a laser cutter in our Makerspace. And so I've took just plain recycled cardboard and made a shape that fits on top of Kibo. And I used Velcro dots to attach it to the top of Kibo. And so this makes a sturdy base for students to build on. So we give each student one of these to make their own creations with. And then there's 2 things that happen with it then. They can take things home. So it allows them to feel really good about something that they made and be able to take it home. But it also shares with the family a little bit about what they've been doing in the classroom. But these will connect to Kibo. And since we don't have one-to-one Kibo robots, I'm not sure anybody does, we can have students go in groups, and their creations then can easily be attached and detached when it's their turn to use the robot. So you'll see this throughout my slides, because it's been an effective way for us to let students build. And again, I've got, I always include usually some sort of a worksheet, because it focuses students, but also asks them to be intentional about what they're doing and why they're programming. And it gives us a record of what they did. Let's see, another one we did separately was, can you turn Kibo into a dragon for the dragon dance? So we had a teacher, a first grade teacher that was interested in talking about the dragon dance and asked if there was something we could do with robots. So in this instance, this is a little different, because we gave each student not only the topper, the cardboard topper, but we gave each, actually it's a group of students, so that 2 of them worked together. They each had a baggie of all the same materials, and they were challenged to use them in some way for their robot. So we put in a few creative constraints there to see what they would do with the materials that they were given. And then they had a little parade, as all of these culminate with a little parade and the student being able to share what they did. And again, we weren't able to do it all at one time, but we took turns in small groups with students being able to take off their tops and put them back on. The engineering design process is something that permeates almost everything we try to do with students, or design thinking or some aspect of it. So this is one of the first things I ever did with Kibo when we first got it, is I went into a pre-kindergarten classroom and took in the book, If I Built a Car. So the work that I did at Tufts for the engineering certificate focused a lot on novel engineering. And that's, if you're not familiar with that, you should go to the website, it's novelengineering.com. It's such a fantabulous way. It uses books and book characters to identify engineering problems in the book that can be engineered, that can have an engineered solution, excuse me. So a lot of characters have problems, but they're not all solved with engineering. So in this book, it's a little different, because what we did is we looked at how this student, If I Built a Car, it's by Chris Van Dusen. It's one of my favorite books. He puts in all these crazy things in his car, or fantastical things. And so we talked about what kinds of problems he might have been trying to solve with that particular solution. So for instance, he included a refrigerator. Well, he wanted to have cold drinks on the go. So we focused a lot on that. So we bring in the angle. So we didn't necessarily solve a problem, but we emulated what they would want in their favorite cars. And again, we had a parade, and it was, it's a super positive experience for students and their teachers. And all of these, by the way, are co-taught with the teacher in the classroom. And if you don't have students in a formal classroom setting, like for instance, if it's a recess in the Makerspace or an early morning drop-in, you can also do just fun off-the-cuff stuff. So one of the things I did one time was I was looking around and I grabbed a Kibo off the shelf and said, here, if you can get it to deliver your snack from that corner over there, you can eat it. So we had them, and then we spent probably a good 30 minutes just discussing snack delivery system, and some students pulled out materials to build something that would carry it, and you can extend it with, have it flash a light when it reaches you, so it's a lot of trial and error, a lot of work with partners, super fun stuff. Let's see. So what are some of the things I've used to teach with Kibo? Can we go to the next slide? So this is, if you've used these mats, I use a lot of robotic systems. Kibo's one of my important tools. I've used mats like this for robots, but they tend to be really expensive. I don't know if Kibo sells one on your website. If you do, I'm sorry. But I went to Home Depot and bought heavy-duty vinyl shades, and I think this was about $20 a piece, and made small grids using a Sharpie marker, just measuring it out. It's about 1 foot, which I think is about the general distance that Kibo travels in a step. But you can easily put in a little chart on a worksheet to say, start in 1A, or if you're studying shapes, you can put shapes down on the different spaces. I bet you could, I've never tried it, I just have this inspiration, I bet you could write on this with a dry erase marker, and then you could say start on the star and drive to the circle. There's just many different ways you can do this, but it also helps delineate a physical space for where a group may work with a robot. And you can see that I left the little roller shade on the end, so when it's done, it can roll right up on its right up on itself and use it. So that has been something that has been used all over the school, up to 6th grade, for all different kinds of robots, but particularly Kibo. Fabulous things can happen with this when you let children run the show. And the last thing I'll say, just in closing, is that limiting the number of materials can encourage creativity, and so you might have ways. We've got in my school, with Makerspace, but then we have maker carts in each hallway of the primary grades. There are some carts that are just completely mobile that I can load up with whatever is needed that I can take. Classroom teachers usually have a lot of materials, but in the photograph there, you can see a little plastic baggie. That's the dragon dance activity. And we gave them materials in a little plastic bag, but I've also used paper bags so that they can't see what's inside to hash, especially now where we need to give things individually to students, where there's not so much sharing going on. But I think the sky's the limit with what you can imagine doing and what you need to integrate with. Thank you.
Sorry. Kim, thank you so much for sharing those. I was really struck by your the themes that you mentioned about working with the classroom teachers and almost like shopping activity concepts to them, both sharing lessons that you'd found in DevTech curriculum or KinderLab curriculum, but also listening to them about projects they were doing, like the Dragon Dance. And that kind of, I know that we have a number of like library media specialists and tech specialists on, and I think that experience of kind of collaborative lesson development with the classroom teachers is one that's probably familiar to a lot of our audience. And it is a really important one to keep in mind that these, you know, we can support these educational goals that the classroom teachers have, and the classroom teachers can bring great sort of activity ideas to us as well. So thank you for kind of highlighting that point. I know that that's sort of a theme throughout the work that you do. Thanks. All right.
Jason,
well, again, just to remind you guys that we can ask any questions that you have for Kim or Brian. Please send them into the questions feature, and we'll address those at the end. But sorry, Brian, I think you were going to comment.
Yeah, just before we move on to my slides, I wanted to add something about what Kim was saying, using books to help inspire kids to do engineering projects. I know there's a lot of administrators on this call also, and one thing that's really great is to meet teachers in K-5 where they have their strengths and where they're confident before you're introducing something like a STEM program that might be intimidating because it has these tech pieces to it. But if you start with literacy and literature, where a lot of our K-5 teachers are really strong at engaging kids, I think that's a great way to leverage them then into these STEM programs. So I love that example that she gave.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that we'll put that link in the chat to Novel Engineering. That is a great program from the Tufts Engineering Outreach Group. And thank you for mentioning that too, Kim. All right, well then, that's a nice segue to our next guest, Brian Flagg. Brian was a science supervisor, as I mentioned, at San Francisco Unified School District in California. He's had a couple of roles at California districts as a math and science teacher, as a makerspace educator, and he's currently a consultant in the field of kind of STEM curriculum and teaching in these ways. So Brian's done a lot of work with Kibo and with other tools and setting up makerspaces, focusing on kind of student engagement in makerspaces and making these kinds of activities available in lots of different contexts. So welcome, Brian, and take it away.
Great. It's nice to be with everybody today. And I wanted to highlight what I've focused on in my work is Kibo's role in makerspaces and how you can use informal settings or use robots in informal settings. So here I have a bunch of the 5th grade students that I work with at one of the sites I was at in Redwood City. So I'll highlight makerspaces and then after school and family events in this presentation. And I was thinking, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking sort of about the 4 keys to success when you're using robotics in a makerspace. And engagement, of course, is at the top of everybody's mind. It has to be engaging for students, it has to draw them in and get them excited about learning. And then doable, we often have really constricted timeframes when kids are in the makerspace. So is the project doable in that time span? and then oriented towards defined small stations that are really an important part of the K2 or pre-K2 world. And then we're always cognizant of building on the standards, be the new computer science standards that are out, NGSS or ELA and math standards. So I can go to the next slide, Jason. So as Kim was saying, there's a lot of resources from KinderLab Robotics about with curriculum. So one of the activities that's in one of their curriculum sets is a Kibo bowling alley. So we took that idea and we cordoned off a little space in our makerspace that defined the bowling alley for kids. And as you can see here, we have the place where Kibo goes that's labeled. And this is part of our UDL design concept is that when kids come in, they know what's expected of them. They know where things are supposed to go. We don't have to do a lot of explaining, but it's also accessible to lots of different learners. And the bowling pins go at one end, Kibo goes at the other end. So if you go to the next slide, Jason, this came directly from one of the Kibo lessons. It's called Kibo Bowling. We used it as something that we would rotate through in the makerspace. One thing that we found is that kids often sort of progress out of different activities and want to move on to something that's either new or novel or just engages them in a different way. So we were always looking for different things we could bring in from these lessons, and Kibo Bowling was great. I'll also talk later about family STEM nights. And we set up Kibo Bowling Alley at one of our family STEM nights too, where the younger students had an activity and then the older students could do a more complex or thing that took maybe more like fine motor skills to do, was at another part of the STEM night space. So I can do the next slide, Jason. But a big part of what I focused on in makerspaces was just design challenges, and some of these came from the curriculum that teachers were using. So in this instance, you can see a student here is holding Kibo and it's attached to a wagon, and he turned that wagon into a covered wagon because in this grade span, they were studying now and long ago. So they were talking about how the settlers came across from east to west and settled the Western United States, and they brought covered wagons to bring all their goods with them. So our challenge to students, we had the basic building blocks for the wagon that they just had to kind of put together. If you see here, the axle was the key part. We made the axle for them, and then they attached a box and stuff. But then how can you attach Kibo, which is a new technology, to this older technology of the covered wagon and make it move across the makerspace? And then we would build on that challenge by adding obstacles, like having the kids build cardboard ramps or having them build obstacles for Kibo to navigate around. So it was a great way of creating this open-ended design challenge in the makerspace, but it was around a concept that was being taught in the classroom during this time of the year with the teachers, which they really appreciated. So I can do the next slide. And then along with those design challenges, this is another one that comes out of the KinderLab curriculum, is the Kibo snowplow. I found that this one was really well set up for the NGS standard in kindergarten of push and pull. So having kids push objects into a space, having them push objects over something, around something, and then also setting up a situation where they're pulling and getting them to use that academic language and reinforcing that. So when they go back to the classroom, that language is already part of the language that they're using in the makerspace. So we're just reinforcing a lot of what the teacher is doing. And the Kibo snowplow is so easy to set up. You just need cardboard and tape. And that was something we had a huge supply of in our makerspaces. So it was easy to put together. And then again, here we're aligning with the NGSS standards for pushing and pulling. But again, the idea is getting kids to engineer that plow so that it sticks to Kibo under different conditions, and they might solve this, and we might, like Kim's saying, we might give them constraints around the types of materials that we use to attach this. We might not use tape, we might use pipe cleaners, we might use some other things that kids have to maybe think a little bit harder about how they're attaching it to Kibo. So there's lots of interesting things you can do with these different design challenges. Next slide. And I can also just say from what Kim was saying, we use books to inspire a lot of what we do in our makerspace around engineering activities. This is another lesson that is included in the Kibo curriculum with the book Move, where animals are discussed, where they're doing different motions, and those are highlighted. So then we ask kids to do a drawing of an animal that they were interested in from the book, and then show the movement of Kibo with that animal that describes the movement that's explained in the book. So we're looking for a couple of things here. We're looking for, are they finding a character and representing that on Kibo with a simple drawing? So are they able to represent that character that they're seeing? Is it a real character from, like, is it a character from the book, or are they just making something up in their head? But then also, are they using the story in the book to represent that movement and then explaining it back to us as educators, that they understand something about what was described in the book? This was a really, I was thinking of this as a really simple activity, but when we watched what kids would create, they actually went far beyond like our expectations, and they took the Kibo blocks and they were building structures that the Kibo could go around and go over or bust. They had built an ice wall out of the Kibo blocks, and a polar bear busted through the ice blocks. It was really just to see their imagination just take off with just this simple activity was really wonderful. And it's easy to set up in a corner of the makerspace. So here's a young student who put a rabbit, and the rabbit was kind of hopping, and the hopping motion was back and forth and forward, back and forth, forward and back. It was really cute. And then finally, one thing I really wanted to highlight was how robotics and Kibo in particular can be used in STEM nights. So I did this at several sites around the districts that I worked in. We would just, if you look at the lower right here picture, there's long pieces of butcher paper, white butcher paper. So those were used to create scribble bots. And the older kids, they took the cup and the little motor with the markers underneath, and then they create a rattling scribble bot that created circles or lines on the butcher paper. But for younger kids, we found that to be really challenging, just attaching the parts that you needed to create the scribbler. So we brought in Kibo as the younger students' activity for the Scribblebot. And Kibo, of course, Kinder Labs has an attachment you can put on with markers here. You see that in the picture, but you don't necessarily need to do that. You can have kids engineer a way to attach the marker to the back of Kibo. And we had kids just using masking tape and putting a marker on there. And it didn't always work. The marker would go sideways and fall off, but that's exactly what you want to see. You want kids struggling a little bit and then trying to figure out how to solve that problem. And for our STEM night, in some of the schools, we were able to purchase The Most Magnificent Thing, the book, which is a wonderful book for inspiring engineering activities, engineering design challenges. And we gave those away in English and Spanish to parents. And a wonderful outcome from this was when kids were finished making their robots, sometimes they would be sitting with their parents reading the book together and just going through the story. So it's a great way, I think, to bring families, communities, and schools together around engineering activities. Do I have another slide, Jason? I can't remember if that was it. Just how you can align your STEM nights to computer science standards. So like Jason and Kim both talked about, sequencing is a big part of the standards for younger kids. Learning about technology and how the different parts fit together, and just basically what a robot is. One of the wonderful things about Kibo is that on the top, it has that wooden platform that's very comfortable for kids. The tactile feature of the wooden platform is really wonderful for that age group. But on the bottom, Kibo is transparent. It has a plexiglass cover, so you can see the wires and the batteries and the inner, Kim's holding it up there, the inner workings. So it gets kids, it opens that black box of like, what's inside a robot? What does it look like? And that's a big part of the computer science standards also. So you can hit a lot of these things through, it seems simple, but you're actually doing a lot to address standards and around what students are supposed to be learning at those age groups. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, this. So in my Makerspace experience, and I'm sure some of you had this, when you open up the Makerspace at the beginning of the year and you give kids sort of free time to just say, go make, right? I found that the younger students gravitated towards abstract expressionist art. That's what I call these little objects that they kept making. And so we highlighted that. We're like, oh my God, we put them in cases. We said, look at our abstract expressionist art display. So you can leverage this with Kibo. If you go to the next slide, Jason, I think it's the next slide. Maybe I have something about this, or maybe. There's activity in the Kibo curriculum called the drop test, which I'm not a big fan of because it asks students to drop Kibo from ankle height to see if they can attach something to the top and to see if it won't fall off. So I was thinking of adapting this to something called Kibo Rodeo, where you attach your abstract art to the top of Kibo, and then you create sort of a bucking bronco program to see if you can shake your object off the top, or you could shake someone else's object or program. You could get kids sharing with each other and just challenging them to engineer attachments and how do we affix things to the top. But also we can be programming kind of a complex a scenario of events that are trying to have this outcome of shaking something off the top of Kibo. So sometimes I just take what kids are naturally drawn to, which is these strange little art objects. Okay, here we go. You're going to attach it to the top of Kibo now and see what we can build off of that. So like Tim said, there's just a really high ceiling with Kibo. And I think the thing that I love best about it is Kibo is kind of a blank slate. And that affords students the opportunity to create something out of their imagination. Kibo can become something. It isn't already a fixed thing that kids look at and say, oh, that's already this robot that has a name and has a character to it. No, Kibo's just a blank top and you make it into what you want to make it in. And I think that's what I'm so drawn to with Kibo and why it's so helpful to use in our makerspaces. So I think that's it for me, Jason. Happy to take some questions or hear what people have to say.
Thank you, Brian. We actually have reached the point where we can address some of the questions and you guys can maybe dialogue a little bit. I did want to acknowledge something that really struck me as you were talking, Brian, was that example from Move, how you were able to show how the activity of the kids, like representing the movement and behavior of the animal, was a direct way of supporting that ELA standard about kind of retelling a narrative, understanding the role of the characters. But I was really struck by you mentioning that the kids also were able to like go beyond, as you put it, and invented these additional challenges for themselves. And I think that's such a great encapsulation of the benefits of like a makerspace philosophy in addressing these standards, because we're giving kids this kind of constructivist prepared environment where we can direct them in a way that we know we have to meet these standards, but they have all of this space, both metaphorical and literal, to go beyond that specific objective.
And that's something that Marina talks about in her book, right? Is the coding as a playground. So you're not the playpen, which is a confined space, but you're thinking about ways to expand this outside of the playpen and into more of a playground where we have these opportunities to go beyond maybe what's the standard lesson that we're working on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we had we do have a couple of questions, so I'll sort of put them to you, and maybe you can sort of take turns in answering or have a bit of a dialogue. We have about 15 minutes left in our presentation. So the first one was actually about kind of group work and facilitating small group work, which connects a little bit to that idea of as we welcome kids back and we try to implement these small group projects like we would do with Kibo. Do you have, are there things that you've observed in your projects about ways to kind of support children as they look to collaborate or share materials or engage in like small group projects in a makerspace like this? Kim, maybe you'd like to speak on?
Yeah, that's something that we start, from the very get-go. If the minute they're handed the first robot, we talk about respect and handling objects with respect, respecting one another. And it's something that is mentioned every single time the robots come out of the box or, you know, off the shelf. It's just meant to permeate. And I think building the culture in a makerspace is really critical. I have 5 rules in the makerspace, and the first rule is not be safe. It's respect. It's respecting each other as the teachers, materials, and tools. And so there's follow up to that, but it permeates everything that we do with students in small groups. But they're definitely talking it out, doing scenarios. What if something happens? And then there always is with young students. There's just reminders. Reminders that, you know, or something that maybe you overhear and you say, you know, let's make sure everybody has a turn, or is there a nicer way, or let's rewind, is there a better way to say that, you know, or, you know, it's just, you do need to facilitate. This isn't something that can come off the shelf and just happen by itself. It needs to be facilitated.
I would just add that with the younger kids, what I've noticed is in kindergarten, early in the year, they're not so good at sharing. That's just not part of their emotional makeup. And so you may have to transition into collaborative activities as you see the kids progressing through their development during the course of a year. The first and second graders, I think, are better prepared for that. But I like to do small stations also, where we have a small group of kids come to where the teacher is, or at a station if you're in a classroom, and then you can rotate those kids through a station. It's depending on the age group. That works really well.
Yeah, and you can also have kind of instructions at the group, you know, decide who's going to do this job, decide who's going to do that job, you know, scaffolding as you need it.
Yeah, that assignment of roles is that's a good sort of technique for setting expectations kind of early about everyone contributing to the group in a different way. All right, we had another question that's on kind of a different gear, more of an administrative kind of question. One of our attendees, their school is looking to implement a STEM program, and they're just curious to hear about kind of how your school's STEM programs are organized, and what's worked well, or what advice you might have for a school starting a STEM program. And I know, Brian, you've worked in a variety of different districts, and Kim's at an independent school, so some nice perspectives there. So maybe, Brian, you'd like to share a little bit of advice there?
Yeah, I would spend as much time as I could upfront working on a vision of what this program is actually for. And then once you have the idea of like what we're doing and why we're implementing this program, is what does it look like for a student to progress from kindergarten, like let's say it's a K-5 school, from kindergarten through 5th grade. What experiences are they having, and how are the devices and curriculum building on each other to give that student the optimum the optimum opportunities for success, right? So the thing that I appreciate about Kibo is that it was created by the same people that created Scratch Junior. So if I'm using Scratch with my 4th and 5th graders, I can be using Scratch Junior with my 2nd, 3rd graders, maybe 1st and 2nd graders, and then Kibo can be the introduction to computer science. So I have a progression across K-5. And I think when you're selling that to staff and trying to promote this, I think it's really good to have that clear understanding of how do all these pieces fit together, what's the goal of this, which for a lot of us is going to be integrating computer science into the core content areas. And then what does it look like for the student experience from K through 5? And what's that 5th grader going to have when they exit and move on to middle school? What skill base do we expect them to have when they're moving on in the 6th? We can be telling the middle schools, hey, this is what our kids are going to come to you prepared with. What do you have to offer them, so that we can let them know that those experiences are out there?
I think I would echo Brian's thought about having a vision to begin with. I think a lot of schools have built pricey places that aren't used maybe the way that they were originally envisioned to be used. I've been fortunate that I came from a school with a very strong maker program to a school that was really headed in the right direction. But I think I would love to have like 2 days of professional development to step back and do like the total big picture of innovative education and what it should be looking like in classrooms, and how it can enhance what teachers are doing, not replace it, and make their jobs easier in so many different ways, and create a better situation for students. I think that messaging is really critical. I know that we've focused a lot on design thinking and engineering design as a framework for teaching children how to problem solve. Almost everything that I do has some aspect of that highlighted, depending on the age of students. So that's a helpful way to look at it. If you have to come in from one angle, that way you can come in, and robotics fits really well with that.
This is sort of a related question that came in about kind of the practicalities of it. The question was, how long is sort of a session with Kibo? What's a period look like, or what's an activity look like? How much time should we set aside for that? And I think that relates to the other question, because it's also about what does it look like to implement a STEM program? Is this a special that kids do, once a week for 40 minutes? Is it something that's integrated as much as possible into, the day within the classroom? So any advice you'd have there about how does it look like to fit robotics or engineering or coding into the week for the students would be
Kim, do you want to speak about that, since you're in the classroom, maybe more than I am?
Yeah, it's it varies. In an independent school, we still are likely to do more in classrooms where the teachers are better informed or more interested in or feel more comfortable with work. It has taken on every form that you can imagine. I mean, it's been 30 minutes once a week for math. It was, every Monday for a month, we would come in and do some initial activities. Other times it was every day for a week. And sometimes, in some instances, we've got projects that will run for a full week in the Makerspace. Those aren't just robotics. I think you'd be hard pressed to do something for a week long, all day long with a robot. You could do it. I've done it before with camps, but I would say most Kibo activities, Brian, what do you think? 40 minutes, 40 to 50, maybe an hour if you've got some open-endedness there.
Yeah, robotics activities always take longer than I think they're going to take.
Yeah.
So as much prep as you can do to front load everything and get everything set up, I think the better. But if you have things set up and the Kibos are ready and the materials are out and organized, I think you could do some things in a half hour. If you're doing something maybe that's a continuum over a few days, and maybe you're not using the classroom, but you're using the Makerspace where you can make a mess and leave it and go to your classroom. That also helps sometimes too.
Mm-hmm. It does, and I will say too, one of the key things that has been something that has really complemented and helped kickstart a Maker program is the extracurricular programming. So it's programming after school enrichment. You do robotics after school enrichment. Suddenly kids are requesting to their teachers, they want to bring in the robots. Can we use those? A robot like Kibo also is pretty sturdy, and I think it's a great addition to a block area in a classroom. If you've brought robots in, you can also, I've done things as little as taking in a robot for a week and having a challenge card, and then having kids check off their names if they were able to complete the challenge. So any way that we can get something in to stimulate the kids is good. But the after school programs are phenomenal for creating interest and experience. So when you go into a classroom, you've got little facilitators that are excited and familiar.
I love the idea of a rotation station, like you're saying, where I check a box where I've gone through the Kibo station. Now I'm moving on to another station. It could be part of math stations for that day or something. Yeah.
Right. Or an extension for so if you go in with the math lesson for a day, for a week, that they use the little cubes. Well, maybe we can put out paper clips and I don't know, Play-Doh containers, teddy bears, whatever the little counting tools are that they could say, you know, what are they discovering? How many bears is it? How many big bears is it? How many paper clips is it? So it's, you know, getting non-standard units of measure in.
That's a great point. And the your observation about the creating synergy with like an after school program or club, for example, and then how that builds this community of peer experts. That's one of the things I love about projects with Kibo or tools like this is children can kind of support each other with kind of sharing their expertise. And that fits into the question about a STEM program too, that a STEM program can be thought of in the progression that Brian mentioned, but it can also kind of go vertically in that it can be implemented in after schools or parent nights or before school activities. So there's a lot of directions that it can go in. So one, I guess we have time for one last question, which is about kind of examples for how coding directly could be used to support kind of SEL or social emotional learning goals. Whether you have any ideas about how kind of coding, in addition to the kind of collaborative work that we do in the environment or the implementation like framework, do you have any ideas for kind of supporting SEL and communication and collaboration and sharing within the context of the coding lessons specifically?
Well, as Kim's highlighted, you know, the bringing kids together in groups and sharing responsibility for an activity is a huge way to impact the social emotional learning in the classroom. And robotics, I think, is the best way to integrate that. I just kids will show you what they're thinking and show you the issues that they're having with one another through their actions of building the robot or working with the robot, and you can start to address those then in the classroom. The other thing that I think about is, can you tell me how you feel by programming the robot to act that out? And it could be something as simple as, you know, which light bulb are you today? And so get that light to flash on Kibo. I'm actually stealing that from, I don't want to butcher his name, but I think it's Lionel Bergeron from New York City. He did a wonderful thing about using SEL with Scratch and having the cat act out, you know, how you're feeling, and with color schemes and stuff like that. You could do the same thing with the robot. The robot goes, like on Kim's grid panel, the robot goes to the color that you're feeling that day. And then you could talk about why you feel that way in a small group setting or something like that. Kim, did you have, I know you had a lot of ideas about SEL you were talking about in your presentation. Did you want to talk some more about those?
The only thing I would say that, well, and of course now I'm remembering all the things I was going to say that I didn't say, but I always start out, when I introduce robotics to kids, I always ask them, you know, who likes to be the boss? Because they get to be the boss of a robot. You know, they don't have control over too many things, but they do love that. The social emotional piece, let me think. Can't remember what I was going to say.
I am not to interrupt you, and you can. We definitely would love to hear. I wanted to share a story that I had heard actually from a teacher that I've worked with in Miami-Dade County. She was working with Kibo. She was working with her students, and at their school, the county was merging two schools together, and they were so there were a bunch of kids from the school that was closing that was going to be joining their school. So what she had the kids do, they decorated their Kibo as a student coming into the class. So sort of like the piglet that you see there, or the whale. They created a drawing of like a kid from the school that's going to be new to their class, and they actually had the Kibos like roll into the circle, and the kids practiced welcoming the new children into the school and sort of asking them how they were feeling and showing them favorite parts of the school. So the teacher was actually able to create this kind of role play modeling of an important social interaction the kids were going to be facing when this school merge happened. I thought that's always sort of touched me as a really powerful way to, you know, robotics really recedes in a moment like that. It's all about the experience that the children are having and kind of the story they're telling and the skills they're practicing. Robotics is just the way that we're accessing that experience. And that seems like a powerful way to merge these ideas. So sorry, Kim, go ahead.
No, I did actually brought to mind what I was going to say was that, and this happened when I was teaching computer in a computer lab many, many years ago. But there are students who don't fall into that, always behave, always do what they're asked to do. You know, the students that operate a little differently, they have more trouble sitting still, more trouble focusing, are kids that are usually really struck by robotics and can have success where they might not have success with other types of learning tools. And I've had teachers be absolutely astounded at the results that they're getting from some of the students when we come in and bring in the robots. So that's from a social emotional standpoint to get a student. I remember the teacher said, I have not seen her sit still like that ever. And then it's also, you know, if there's a chance that they're not going to get to play with the robot or get to control the robot, you know, you just get an upped standard of cooperation from kids when they are really invested in want to do what you're bringing them to do.
Mm-hmm. I can second what Kim's saying, that I've heard a lot of feedback from teachers after a robotics activity of, I never saw that student so engaged, or I never saw that student working through a problem with so much focus and attention as when they were in this activity. I think that's a beautiful thing about robotics and computer science.
Yeah, that's a great outcome. All right, well, I think we could go on for as long as people wanted to, but we did promise that this was a 1 hour webinar, so we've come up to the end of our hour. I do want to share, Kim and Brian had both mentioned a couple of times different curricula that are available, and KinderLab does have a wide range of curriculum. The DevTech group at Tufts has a wide range of free curriculum, including that Who Am I that you saw in Kim's slide. All of those are available via our website. We have a nice booklet here that's kind of has a real kind of makerspace vibe to it, that's all about cross-curricular lessons that you can run by using kind of like a built or represented floor map environment. We touch on social studies integration, ELA, math, a lot of the integrations that Kim and Brian shared. So I encourage you to grab this booklet. And it's actually, if you're on live with us right now, it's available in the handouts tab of the GoToMeeting interface. So you can download that PDF right now or grab it from that URL on our website. So I'll close just with this slide that has contact info for our speakers and for me. Please reach out. I know our speakers have said that they would welcome, you know, contact if you have questions about the stuff that you heard today, or if you're interested in learning more about Kibo, feel free to contact me. But thank you very much for joining us for this webinar, and thank you so much, Brian and Kim, for sharing your expertise today. It was wonderful to have you here, and we look forward to talking to you again. So farewell, everyone.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thank you.